Welcome to the Athlete Insights Podcast, hosted by Yash Pad Day, a podcast focused on letting athletes tell their journeys in their sport. This podcast is presented by Boxed Water. Boxed water is better.
Welcome into another episode of the Athlete Insights Podcast. Today I've got my guest, Coach Felicia Teeter. She's the head coach for the Bethel College women's flag football team and the running backs coach for the men's tackle team at Bethel College as well. And Coach Teeter, I appreciate you. I know you said off camera you were in Vegas. You're on a recruiting trip, so I appreciate you taking the time out of the busy schedule and recruiting. I know how busy that can be, and so appreciate you taking the time and spending it with me for a couple of minutes.
No, thanks for reaching out. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And so with all my guests, I like to go back to the beginning. And so when you think about, you're coaching football now, you're very involved in sport, you're an adjunct instructor as well within the sport realm. And so can you talk about when did you first kind of fall in love with sport as a kid? When did that really strike when you fall in love with sport? Kind of talk about that.
When I grew up, we still all played in the streets. All the kids in the neighborhood still play in the streets. I think I always remember playing sports, whether it was organized or just like the neighborhood kids.
Yeah.
We played, wiffle ball or Nerf football, or, if it rained, we'd go up to the park and play football or basketball. Like literally all the kids played everything. And then I always played on organized. Once I got to be like probably grade school, always played soccer and softball and ran. So always kind of was involved in athletics, but joined the Army when I was 18. And so when I was in the Army, I did all the, intramural sports.
Yeah.
So still got to keep doing it. So even though I was not like, any kind of collegiate star, always have got to do sports.
Yeah.
But probably as I had my 3 kids, it was kind of a resurgence as all my kids then as they were growing up got involved in sports. So,
Gotcha.
I think you have a period of time when you're like just working and grinding and you weren't doing it. And then all of a sudden my kids got to be, and then you're raising little kids. And once they got old enough to do organized sports, I think is when I got to kind of re-fall in love with them again.
Gotcha. And is there any, I want to talk about high school, I want to talk about your experience in the Army and all those things. But is there any youth sport memory? Like you said, you grew up playing in the streets, you grew up playing sports in the streets. So it's like, is there any youth memory that really stands out, core memory with sport that really stands out for you?
I think it was just that, I think it's just those lessons you learn just when you're playing sports all the time without adults around to enforce rules. And so, when you're playing neighborhood, about like everybody from the littlest kid in the neighborhood to the oldest kid, and you kind of have to, try to balance out teams to make them fair so they're fun. And then, older kids got to look out for traffic, especially if you're playing Nerf ball in the street. And I think you just kind of officiated yourself. And I think those are just some life lessons that probably always served me well, even though it probably took till I was older to reflect and like, when you see things and you're like, why are they not doing that? And it's like, oh yeah, those were all lessons we learned just because, I was the generation of latchkey kids. we raised ourselves in the streets. And I think there's just some lessons that we all learned about teamwork and getting along and fairness that, without adults around, you kind of had to figure it out yourself. So.
Yeah. No, it's always interesting to understand kind of the core memory on the youth side. So it's great to kind of see kind of those experiences that you had on the youth level. And moving into the high school realm, can you talk a little bit about your experiences with sport or what sports you kind of got into at the high school level and things of that nature?
When I was in high school, I did soccer and softball and cross country. I will tell you, I was there was a reason I joined the Army at 18. I was a pretty delinquent kid. So, I was like the smart kid in the class who probably wasn't focused. So I definitely needed the discipline. So, I think I just always loved being part of the team and team sports much more than like I was kind of forced to do cross country and track, but never really loved it. Really never, like if I'm running around on the field for an hour and a half playing soccer, I won't even think about it. But if you tell me I have to go run for 20 minutes, that just seems like torture to me.
Yeah.
So I think it's just, I always loved kind of the camaraderie and the teamwork aspect of team sports.
Yeah.
And I know some other people like probably, love other sports for different reasons. But for me, it was always, doing things and being successful with the team of other people doing them was always the most fun, I think.
Gotcha. And you mentioned at 18 you joined the Army, and first of all, thank you for your service and everything you've done
Sure.
within the United States military. But can you talk about your experiences in the Army? What is one like lesson you mentioned? Being in the Army and kind of the rigorous aspect of being in the Army. But can you mention like a lesson or something that you took away from your time in the Army?
I mean, I think it's just the emphasis on leadership. I
Mm,
mean, I just think the way the Army trains like leaders is that it's not so much that you're specializing in a skill set, is that you're learning these leadership traits. And the idea is if you're a good leader, leadership is leadership is leadership. And I should be able to plug you into any situation or organization and
yeah,
you go be a leader. And
yeah,
so I think that's just a valuable trait that I think there's some things you don't realize how valuable they are till you get older. And
yeah,
so I think it just, the whole process of basic training of stripping down who you are and kind of rebuilding you into this new person with a different set of core values and expectations. And
yeah.
I just think leadership, at least when I came through, that was just so foundational to everything we did. And that still is something I carry through to me, whether I was raising my kids to be leaders or now as I'm coaching kids to be leaders. And I think that being a leader, regardless of the venue, whether it's nonprofit, whether it's in the public sector, whether it's a private sector, whether it's on a field, whether it's in your church group, I
Yeah.
think that leadership transcends anything else.
And how have you been able to take that leadership skill, and can you talk about the application on the coaching side of football and how you've been able to develop players and develop that through the leadership skill that you learned in the Army?
Yeah, for sure. Like, and again, like, so when I left the Army for 10 years, then I still worked for Department of Defense for another 20 years as a civilian. So I was
Wow.
still in that same environment for, 30 years, basically developing young men and women,
Yeah.
that whole time. And so I didn't start coaching football until my youngest graduated high school. So I tell people sometimes you got to wait till you're in your 50s to grow up and do what, you're having a lot of fun doing. So, I
Yeah.
mean, so by the time I actually was coaching my first position group, I mean, I had already been leading young men and women for, 40 years.
Yeah.
So how I do it is like, you got to start with the basics. You got to assume they know nothing about leadership. And so you got to set that expectation. And anytime leadership is going to be your focus, you as a leader have to, you don't get to have off time. You have to emulate whatever that is that you're trying to impart to them all the time. I
Yeah.
mean, you can talk all day, but actions are going to speak louder. So if
Yeah.
you're deciding like, hey, my core of what I'm going to do and how I'm going to teach and how I'm going to develop these young men and
Yeah.
women is leadership, well, then you better step up. Like you got to be that person all the time. And so I think that's the first thing is set an example and being consistent.
Mm.
Like, so I like when I'm recruiting now, I'm recruiting college kids, so I can talk a little freer, but I'm like, hey, I'm the same asshole every day.
Yeah.
Like, you know what to
Yeah.
expect. But
Yeah.
like, you don't have to worry what kind of mood you're going to face. Like, I'm going to be the same every day. And it doesn't mean I don't love you, but like the standard is the standard. And
Yeah.
then you have to hold through to it. I think a lot of times people say, they have the idea that they want to have a standard. And I think this is something I learned in the military, but it's, are you willing to adhere to that standard even when it sucks, even when you're getting your butt kicked, even when everything isn't working right?
Yeah.
And if you start leaving your standard at that point to take the path of least resistance, well, then your standard was meaningless, and the kids all see that. So, I
Yeah.
mean, to me, the harder it is the more critically important it is for you to adhere to whatever that standard is.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's just like showing up every day the same and just repeating the same thing over and over. And so
Mhm.
I emphasize that. And it doesn't matter if I'm coaching young men or young women, it's still the same. Like leadership is my expectation. And so
Mhm.
we talk about being a lead, like talking like a leader, acting like a leader, thinking like a leader. And what does that look like? What
Yeah.
does it look like in the classroom? What does it look like in practice? What does it look like on game day? What does it look like in your relationships? And what does it look
Mhm.
like in your personal life? And so we
Yeah.
just kind of, you just kind of keep beating that drum all the time.
Yeah.
And so,
And
I
I'm
mean,
ass-
yeah,
yeah.
it's literally everything I do is kind of comes back to that.
Yeah. And I'm assuming that kind of fits in. The follow up to that I was going to ask is, I teach at Midway University here in Midway, just outside of Lexington, Kentucky, and I'm big on helping young people, just like yourself, and coaching and doing that stuff, and have to think through a teaching philosophy, and I always tell my students about this is my philosophy when I teach, and this is kind of what I'm going to do. And my follow up to what you had talked about, which I think I kind of know the answer to anyway, but I'll ask in that regard of is leadership kind of that's the big portion of your coaching philosophy? What does your coaching philosophy kind of revolve on?
Yeah, so leadership and toughness,
Okay.
right? So those are the two things. And they kind of, to me, they go hand in hand. So like when I talk about tough, we talk about being tough at all. So like for my running backs, our slogan is hashtag TAAT, and I stole it from another coach, but it's tough at all times. And so we talk about that. What does toughness look like? We talk about moral courage and physical courage. And so what does that look like in different scenarios in your life? And so, so when I do my grading, whether it's practice or a game, a lot of time, we used to do alignment, assignment, and execution. Why do alignment, assignment, and toughness?
Yeah.
And then for down marks, I don't just do loafs, I do loafs and softs. So if you didn't do it tough, then that's soft. Like if you ended up like that was a weak pass or whatever, like, and so nobody wants to get a soft, and so we just talk about, and so yeah, you got to reinforce whatever your standard is with what you're measuring, because that's what they're going to perform to. And so like if I'm going to rip somebody in a position meeting about it, like I'm going to go through, I'm going to show them examples, or like, hey, why did you do this? This wasn't right. And so, but those are the things I'm going to hold them accountable for, not like making a mistake, not making a physical mistake, you're going to get a loaf for that. If it's a mental loaf, whatever. But like what we're going to rip people about is like those kind of things. And I always tell my kids, I'm not a screen from the sidelines. I'm not going to dog cuss you from the sidelines.
Yeah.
I might sub you out and bring you next to me, and then we're going to have a very, vigorous discussion on the sideline. But I'm probably not going to try to embarrass him. And I tell them the only way you're going to get me screaming at you from a sideline is if you're getting ready to embarrass me, your family, or the program by acting disrespectful on the field. Like that's the only time I'm going to jerk a kid, like yell at a kid off the field. But like making a mistake, mental or physical, I'm not going to embarrass you on the field. Like we have plenty of time in film to go over. If it's really bad, I'm going to pull you out. We're going to have a conversation. But doing one of those other character type, that's the only thing that's really going to get me to embarrass you on the field. And you're going to wish you never went. You won't do it twice.
Yeah. And you mentioned the idea of film, and you see a lot of kids. I coached high school ball when I was getting my PhD and everything, and you see a lot of kids that are averse to watching film or potentially don't watch film. Can you talk about the importance of that, like learning from your mistakes and kind of building? You said, you pull a kid and making a mental mistake and you kind of help him learn, and you're really showing examples and going through that process. You're not going to rip the kid apart. Can you talk about that process and kind of, what film and what those different things teach you in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, I think every coach talks about like film doesn't lie.
Yeah.
And so I mean, I had, one of my running backs this year, like in a game, and he was one of my upperclassmen, and I was like,
yeah.
And I was like, hey, you like, what were you doing? You didn't do it like for some reason. He's like, no, I did.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, like, let's watch. Okay, 1001, and we're watching on film. And it's like, okay, stop. I got it. And it's like, so it's like, but making sure like, it's good for, I think, you as a coach too, because sometimes in the heat of the moment, you might think something. When you go look at film or you look at it from their angle, you realize, oh, okay, this is what they were seeing.
Yeah.
This is what they were seeing. So even though I'm like on the sideline and it doesn't make any sense to me to do it, if I look at it from a end zone, and so I think it's good for you as a coach too, not just for the players, to make sure, you're not unfairly criticizing. I'm like, okay, I see why you saw that, but like, what were you thinking? And so I do a lot of like, because we want to make sure, mentally we're okay. So what were you thinking when you saw this? Okay, at this moment, like, what was your pre-snap read? What are you thinking right now that they're doing before? And so it's just a lot of, I use it for is like, what were you thinking? Because like, you can't, like, to me, the only purpose of film is to go back to make it so we don't make the same mistakes over. I'm telling, like, I want you to make mistakes, but let's make new, bolder, braver,
newer mistakes,
fantastic mistakes. So we're like, let's not make the same mistakes. And so, and that comes down, we talk about being coachable, and that comes down to that. Like, are you coachable? Like, if I'm having to keep getting on you for the same thing, like, you're just not being coachable. And now I don't even want to talk to you because I'm just wasting my oxygen. Like, why? We're not even having a conversation. I had a girl, and it was something simple. She just didn't hit her landmark, right? So wide receiver, and I'm like, yeah, look, it's a 3-step slant, and you're going like 6, 7. You're like way too deep, and it caused this to all happen with the play because you're not. She's like, no, I didn't. I only went 3 steps. I'm like, no, you didn't. And she was like, well, I was like, stop. Put up the film. All right, here's 1 step. Here, okay, here's your 3rd step. Oh, wait, another step, 4. Oh, another 5. And she's like, oh gosh, coach, I swear I didn't think I did it. Well, that's why we watch the film, right?
Yeah,
so, And that's why you were like, 7 yards deeper by the time you got to the slant, than you should have been in your landmark. And this is how everything, wasn't where it should have been because of that. And so I try to use it for that. I mean, it just takes time. Right now, that's probably my biggest thing, is not like having as much time as I would like on either side. To really spend more time with the film.
And can you talk about, speaking of time, I know you mentioned earlier, I want to hit on this point as well. You mentioned you were in the Army for 10 years, you worked at the Department of Defense for 20 years, and then you got into coaching at 50, which is great. Can you talk about that transition from working in U.S. government and the military, and then transitioning into coaching, kind of what that transition's like?
Well, the best part is the clothes. I mean, I don't have to wear suits anymore. So, I mean, I joke I get to dress like a teenage boy every day. So that's fun, I have just tons of sneakers and shorts, but as far as like, I think it's just true. It's like when, people always talk about find something you love to do. And I did love when I was, working for the military, but I think, people always talk about different careers. Like when I got out of the Army after 10 years, they're like, oh, you didn't make it a career. I'm like, what are you talking about? I treated it like a career every day of those 10 years. It was just a 10-year career. It wasn't a 20. And then when I was in civil service, I treated it like a career. And so to me, it's just like the career isn't the length of the time you do it. It's the attitude with which you approach it. And so I think that is still carried over. Like I find a lot of it transferable. Like I didn't get my first, I was coaching high school football in West Texas. And when I got offered the first head coaching job for Flag, it was at a JUCO. And it wasn't because of my amazing football, knowledge. It was because they needed someone that could build a program, recruit, understood how to resource manage, like all those things that I had been doing for strategic planning and other things for the military forever.
All transferable skills.
Yeah. I mean, because if you know how to program manage, you know how to program manage, and it doesn't really matter what environment is. Manpower, budget, facilities, equipment, like time, like all those things are the same. It's just you're applying it to a different you're applying, it doesn't matter. Like I said, like same thing if I'm planning a gala for a symphony, I still got to go, okay, if we're going to have a gala, I need, what is my manpower, what's my budget, what's my, so really once you know how to manage a program, those skills are transferable. So I find almost all of it transferable. I mean, the funner part is I like working with, 18 to 24-year-olds is a lot funner than bossing around a bunch of, 40 to 60-year-olds.
No, 100%.
They're a lot more malleable. And, no offense to any of my former subordinates, but it's a lot more fun working with,
Yeah. No, it's the youth keep people young. That's the way I mean, I'm 28, but I feel like I'm getting older and I'm getting up there, but, no, and the other aspect too is you mentioned your head coaching job in flag football. You're also the head coach for the women's flag football team, Bethel College, and obviously women's sports has exploded. It's it's been great. It's long overdue in terms of how that has played out. And so, can you talk about your experiences in the flag football world, and especially with the women's team that you're coaching?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's spun up. So like, this is my third year doing flag. So I didn't even know it was a collegiate sport till I got offered the first job at the JUCO. It was just somebody that mentored me, like sent my resume to an AD because she thought it would be good interview practice. Yeah. And so I didn't even know I was coaching tight ends and fullbacks at a high school in Lubbock, Texas. And so from 3 years ago, there was like less than 25 teams, I think, in the country at any level of college. Yeah. And like this now, it literally changes weekly, but I think we're up to like 110 colleges. And that's just ones that have it as a varsity sport, not all the ones that are doing it as a club sport. And so you're talking about from, that's just in a couple years that you've had that kind of growth. And so and recruiting is a challenge because everybody's building these programs. So it's not like when I recruit boys, if I go to a school and you're the head coach or you're the recruiting coordinator for a high school team, and I'll be like, hey, let me have your prospect sheet. You'll kind of already said, hey, these are my D1 guys. These are the D2 guys. And so, I kind of like, okay, I'm at an NAIA. I can be impressed watching the football skills of that D1 guy, but I'm probably not going to waste time recruiting that kid. He's already got bigger, better offers than me, right? Yeah. Flag isn't like that right now because everybody's trying to build their program. Like, so girls that maybe aren't even like that amazing of an athlete, they've got 15 offers. from every single level, because everybody's trying to build their program. So everybody needs, 25 to 35 young ladies on the roster. And it's still so new. So I tell parents of kids, like, now is the time. Like, you can be a college athlete right now as a girl. Go play flag someplace. Like, because some of the states where it's not a sanctioned sport, I'll take girls that are track or basketball, and I'm like, if you're coachable and you're athletic, I'll teach you what we need to do. Yeah. And so it really is a time. And so, my other big thing is, like, parents, you do not need to pay for a recruiting service for your girls' flag football. Like, you can literally look up on any school you can, like, ask Chat GPT to give you a list of schools that got flag football, and then get the contact number for the coaches. And literally, you can spend a weekend and your kid will have 15 offers. Like, you don't, like, I wouldn't pay anybody a dime to do that. Like,
just reach out on your own via email and other things. Yeah,
because we're all going to respond. Everyone's trying to, build programs and maintain it. So, that makes it challenging. I think it'll probably take, and right now we don't even have the D1s. There's only a couple D1s that have it as a varsity sport. Most of them are doing it as a club sport. Yeah. And so when they come on board, you figure once they come on board, it's still going to probably take 3 or 4 years before we have a trickle down where you actually can go, okay, if I go to a high school, this is a D1 kid, this is but it's still going to be definitely in growth for the next 4 or 5 years. So now I have a lot of guys that I know that are coaching on the tackle side that now see opportunities to coach collegiately if they're willing to do flag. And so I have a lot of them reaching out to me about, like, hey, how do I develop the recruiting? It's the same thing. It's not the coaching part. At the end of the day, football is football. There's some different rules. You need to learn the different rules for the atmosphere, but it's the, how do I build a program? How do I go about recruiting? How do I go about finding, like, what do I need the first year? What am I going to need the second year? So, that's what I spend more time answering those questions. And then some are so funny. They'll ask me this stuff, and then I'll find out, like, dude, you're going to be playing against, like, you're trying to get that school's expanded in my conference. Like, you're asking me to give you all my tea, and you are literally, it's funny.
Yeah, you're going to be,
you're going to be recruiting the same kids, recruiting the same kids as me, man. Like, what? Come on now. And so, no, it's definitely wide open. But this, so I'm a member of AFCA, which is American Football Coaches Association. And so this year at the conference in January, they're getting ready to add a breakout session for flag football for the first time. Oh. And so I'm going to be kind of helping get that organized. So I'm pretty excited about that. Just to kind of, I think I like the idea of tying it together. Yeah. I think that was one of my frustrations when the JUCO I was at did not have tackle football. And so some of the things that I loved about football were that kind of sense of, like, how you can have a culture changing effect on a campus, especially like in Texas, when if you've got 150 guys in your program, you can really affect the culture of a program. And I was so delusional thinking me and 15 girls at a JUCO were going to be able to have this cultural impact. And so when I took the job at Bethel, 2 things: I wanted to roll with the men's team, and the other was I wanted to have a lot of cross-pollination between the 2 teams. Yeah. So, like, if you're at Bethel College, I didn't want if you're a football player, and it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, like, this is our standard. Yeah. And so I work, obviously I'm part of the staff, but also we work really closely together back and forth. So like I have all my women's team, they work the chains for all the home men's game for football. And like I have a bunch of the guys on the team that do their, like, student work study with me. So they're like my flag football operations staff, or they're flying the drone for me, or they're helping out on game day. And like all of the coaches on the football side help me on game day stuff for flag. So whether they're running the clock or doing the down box or
so it's very
the announcer. Yeah. And so but I think it's not just good for, my women's team. I think it's good for our young men too, because I'm like, you're seeing all of us work together, whether it's coaches, whether it's players. And I always tell the guy, like, your first boss might look a whole lot more like me than him. Like, so learning how to operate in that environment is just going to make them better leaders, period.
Yeah. And it all, like you said, it all comes back to the trait that you've developed in the Army over time is leadership, and really building that leadership quality among young people in general. And it's great to see kind of what you've done throughout your career, and now in the coaching realm with flag football, and enhancing visibility, enhancing ideas for women's flag football. But always end the podcast. I really started this as a way to help inspire young athletes and develop that process. And so I always end the podcast by asking my guest is, if you're standing in a room with a bunch of young people, young men and young women, in general, what's one piece of advice? What's one thing that you tell them? What's one piece of advice you'd give to young people, young athletes, trying to get to the level and play college football or play flag football? Kind of what's the one piece of advice?
I guess I think the first thing is like be willing to do the work. Like don't like keep a like don't let negative mental thoughts intrude, regardless of where it's coming from. If that's your goal, then they find out what your gap is. If that's your goal, you have to be self-aware enough to give yourself a self-assessment of like, what are your weaknesses? And if you can't do it yourself, you need to get someone you trust. And then find out, okay, it's like backward planning. So like, how do I get to where I want to be if this is where I'm at? And you got to be honest with yourself. And then are you willing to put in that work?
Yeah.
Like, because everyone isn't. Like everyone isn't. You might look at that. My son played power for football. My younger daughter was very athletic, but when she saw what he was going through, she's like, you know what? I want to have a social life. Like, I'm not interested in that. And so like, be honest with yourself. Like, if you don't want to put in the work, then don't be a college athlete, because you're going to be miserable and you're going to make everyone around you miserable.
Yeah.
Like, it's a lot of work to be a college athlete.
100%.
And if you don't want to do the work, then go do a club sport or go do intramurals. Like, go have fun being an athlete. Yeah. But like, if you're not willing to put in the work, then just don't do it. You're just wasting your time and everybody around you.
And that goes for anything in life when you're building,
I think so.
Right? Like, whatever you're doing, whatever your goal is, you got to continually reevaluate. And I had a buddy of mine say, this was the goal and this is still his goal. And we're saying like, I said, well, sometimes you got to redirect your goal, in terms of like what you want to do and things. And
I for sure didn't grow up thinking, oh, I want to grow up and be a football coach.
Yeah.
Like that wasn't even on the realm of an item I would have thought. But like, I can't imagine having more fun than doing what I'm doing right now.
Oh yeah.
Right. So,
and that's the key, right? It's enjoying,
be open,
be open, keep an open mind. And it's great to see what you can accomplish. But that's all the time we have for this episode of the Athlete Insights podcast. Again, I want to thank Coach Felicia Teeter and for taking the time. Again, thank you for your service as well in the U.S. military and again taking the time today. I know you, like I said, you're on a recruiting trip, and I hate to intrude, but I appreciate you spending time with me. And you can follow Coach Teeter. I'll have your Instagram and your Twitter linked, as well as your LinkedIn in the YouTube description and Spotify description. And so you can follow Coach Teeter's career and Coach Teeter as she moves forward Bethel College. And you can follow my podcast on YouTube, Google Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you get a podcast, you'll find this one. But Coach Teeter, appreciate you.
Thanks again. It was nice to visit with you.
Yep. And we'll see you next time.